The great chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 years. Its walls were made of crystal from the moons of Vex Prime, and its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside it. Representatives from 947 species sat in their assigned places, each one breathing different air, seeing different light, and thinking in ways that no other species could truly understand. High Arbiter Zexthel moved her forearms in a gesture of frustration. She was a Kethrani, a species that had helped found this council 6,000 years ago. Her silver skin reflected the light from the giant screens that showed data from across the galaxy. Today, those screens showed something that had never been seen before. "Explain this again," she said. Her voice was calm, but those who knew her species could see the tension in the way her neck ridges stood up. "You are telling me that these humans have formed a bond of friendship with the Vrixkal." Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the podium meant for new species. Humans had only been part of the council for 3 standard years, barely enough time to learn how to use the translation devices properly. He was a small figure in this massive hall, surrounded by beings that could crush him, eat him, or melt him with a thought. "Yes, High Arbiter," he said. "The colony on Kepler 442b includes a mixed settlement. Humans and Vrixkal live together. They share meals. Their children play together." A sound like thunder came from the section where the Morgoth sat. They were beings of living stone, and when they laughed it sounded like an earthquake. "The Vrixkal do not play," one of them said. "They hunt. They kill. They do not form bonds with prey species." "They are not prey to us," Ambassador Chen said simply. "They are neighbors." The chamber went silent. The concept of a prey species not seeing predators as threats was strange enough. But the Vrixkal were not just predators. They were the most feared hunters in the known galaxy. Their bodies were covered in scales harder than steel. They had 6 eyes that could see heat, movement, and the electrical patterns of a beating heart. For 30,000 years, every species that encountered them either fought them or died. Senior Observer Quilks from the Science Division floated forward. He was a Navashi, a species that existed partly in normal space and partly in another dimension that no one else could perceive. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We have confirmed reports," he said. "Our monitoring station on the third moon of Kepler 442b has been observing this settlement for 2 standard years. The data is clear. Human and Vrixkal individuals are forming what can only be described as friendship bonds." "Show us," High Arbiter Zexthel commanded. The screens changed. 947 species watched in stunned silence as footage played. A human child, no more than 6 years old, was running across a field of purple grass. Behind her, a Vrixkal juvenile followed. The alien was 4 times her size, its claws leaving deep marks in the ground with every step. The child tripped and fell. The Vrixkal stopped. And then, with movements that seemed impossible for a creature built for killing, it gently picked her up. The child laughed and hugged one of its massive legs. "Her name is Maya," Ambassador Chen said. "The Vrixkal's name is Krexther. Maya calls him her best friend. He calls her little sister." The Morgoth representative spoke again, his voice now soft with confusion. "This is not possible. The Vrixkal neural structure does not allow for such bonds. We have studied them for millennia. They see only threats, prey, and rivals." "Perhaps," Ambassador Chen said carefully, "you have not studied what happens when someone treats them differently." High Arbiter Zexthel leaned forward. Her species had photographic memory, and she was already comparing this footage to everything she knew about galactic history. "Ambassador Chen, how did this begin?" 5 years ago, our colony ship arrived at Kepler 442b. We did not know the Vrixkal had a hunting outpost there. When we landed, they attacked." He paused. "We lost 43 people in the first hour." "As expected," someone murmured from the assembly. "The Vrixkal do not negotiate." "That is what we were told," Ambassador Chen agreed. But our colony leader, Dr. Sarah Martinez, made a different choice. When the Vrixkal hunting party cornered our survivors in a canyon, she walked out to meet them, alone, unarmed. The screens showed the recording from that day. A single human woman, her face bloody and her clothes torn, walked toward a group of 12 Vrixkal warriors. Each one could have killed her in less than a second. She sat down in front of their leader, Ambassador Chen continued, and she offered him food. The footage showed exactly that. Dr. Martinez, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, holding out a ration bar to a creature that had just killed dozens of her people. Why? High Arbiter Zexthal asked. The question seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that had never understood humans. Ambassador Chen smiled sadly. Because that is what humans do. When we see something that frightens us, something that hurts us, something that everyone says cannot be reasoned with, we try anyway. We cannot help it. It is in our nature to reach out. The Vrixkal representative had been silent until now. He was massive even by his species standards, his scales a deep crimson that marked him as a senior warrior. When he spoke, his voice was like gravel being crushed. I was there, he said. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ in the chamber turned to him. I was the one she offered food to. He paused, and something that might have been emotion crossed his alien face. I did not understand. In 30 generations of my family line, no prey had ever done such a thing. We kill, we eat, we move on, that is our way. He stood, his massive form casting a shadow over the assembled representatives. But she looked at me, not with fear, not with hatred. She looked at me as if I were a person. The chamber was utterly silent. I did not eat her, the Vrixkal continued. I did not know why, I still do not fully understand, but I took her food. I sat with her, and for the first time in my life I talked to prey as if they were equals. He looked at Ambassador Chen with his 6 eyes. That human, that small, fragile, foolish human, she changed everything. The news of the human-Vrixkal friendship spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Within 3 days, every major news network was talking about it. Within a week, scientists from hundreds of species were requesting permission to study the settlement on Kepler 442b. But for Dr. Sarah Martinez, life continued as it always had. She woke before dawn, as she had done every day for the past 5 years. She made coffee from beans that grew surprisingly well in the alien soil, and she walked out to meet Vrakthos, the Vrixkal who had once tried to kill her. You are thinking too much, he said as she approached. His translator device rendered his growls into words, but after years of practice, Sarah could understand some of his natural language. The click he made at the end was his way of expressing concern. The council wants to send observers, she said, sitting down beside him on the ridge that overlooked the valley. Below them, the settlement was waking up. Human children were already running toward the school building. Vrixkal younglings were playing a hunting game in the eastern field, their happy screeches carrying on the morning wind. Let them come, Vrakthos said. What we have built here speaks for itself. Sarah smiled. 5 years ago, this being had looked at her as food. Now, he was her closest advisor and her friend. The other humans had thought she was insane when she first approached him. Many had begged her not to go, but something in her had known that violence would only lead to more violence. Do you remember what you said to me? She asked. That first day when I offered you the ration bar. Vrakthos made a sound that his translator rendered as laughter. I said you were either the bravest or the most stupid creature I had ever encountered. And what did I say back? You said you were probably both. He turned one of his 6 eyes to look at her directly. I still believe that is true. The first observation team arrived 2 weeks later. They came from the Navashi Science Division, floating beings who existed partly outside normal space. Their leader, Observer Quilks, had been studying sentient species for 300 years. He thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. "This is impossible," he said on his first day, watching a human farmer share lunch with a Vrixkal hunter. They sat together under a tree that had been imported from Earth, eating food that suited neither of their digestive systems perfectly, but that they had learned to enjoy together. "You keep using that word," Dr. Martinez said. She was accompanying him on his tour of the settlement. "But you are looking at it with your own eyes." "The Vrixkal brain structure does not allow for emotional bonds with other species," Quilks insisted. "We have studied them for millennia. Their neural pathways are built entirely around hunting instincts. And yet there they are." Sarah gestured to where Maya, now 7 years old, was teaching Krexther how to play a human game called tag. The massive Vrixkal juvenile was deliberately running slowly, letting her catch him, making sounds of mock distress when she tagged his leg. "How?" Quilks asked. The question held thousands of years of scientific certainty crumbling inside it. "We treated them like people," Sarah said simply. "Not like monsters, not like threats, just people. Different from us, yes. Dangerous, certainly, but still people." Over the following months, observer Quilks documented everything. He watched human and Vrixkal families share meals together. He saw Vrixkal warriors teaching human children how to track animals, and human teachers instructing Vrixkal younglings in mathematics. He observed a human doctor treating a wounded Vrixkal hunter, and a Vrixkal elder comforting a human child who had nightmares. But the moment that changed his understanding forever came on a quiet evening, when he witnessed something no scientist had ever recorded. A Vrixkal mother had just lost her hatchling to a disease that their medicine could not cure. In Vrixkal culture, death was seen as weakness to be forgotten. Mourning was considered shameful. A Vrixkal who showed grief would be cast out from their hunting pack. The mother, Esrakval, stood alone at the edge of the settlement, her massive form trembling with an emotion she had been taught all her life to suppress. And then Sarah Martinez walked up beside her. She did not say anything. She simply stood there, a tiny human next to a giant predator. After a long moment, she reached up and touched Esrakval's arm. The Vrixkal mother looked down at her. In her eyes, Quilks could see confusion, pain, and something else. Something that the scientific literature said was impossible for her species to feel. "It is okay to be sad," Sarah said softly. "I lost a child too before we came here. My son. His name was Michael." Esrakval made a sound that the translator could not interpret. It was not a word in any Vrixkal language. It was something raw and real, something that her species had never been allowed to express. She knelt down, her massive form folding until she was at Sarah's level. And then, for the first time in recorded Vrixkal history, one of their kind wept in the presence of another species. Sarah held her, a small human woman embracing a creature that could have destroyed her with a single movement. She held her and let her grieve. Quilks recorded it all, but his scientific detachment had disappeared. He was watching something that his 300 years of study had never prepared him for. He was watching the birth of something new. His report to the Galactic Council was 30,000 pages long. It contained data, analysis, and evidence, but the summary was simple. "Humans possess an ability that we have never documented in any other species," he wrote. "They can form genuine emotional bonds with any sentient being, regardless of species, biology, or cultural background. They do not do this through technology or telepathy. They do it through pure, stubborn compassion." He paused in his writing, remembering Sarah Martinez standing beside a grieving Vrixkal mother. "This ability is not a weakness," he continued. "It may be the most powerful force in the galaxy." When his report reached the council, it caused an uproar. Some dismissed it as impossible. Others feared what it might mean for the carefully balanced power structures that had kept the galaxy at peace for millennia. But a few began to wonder. If humans could befriend the Vrixkal, the most feared hunters in known space, what else might they be capable of? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. The crystalline empire had not spoken to any other species in 4,000 years. They existed in their own section of the galaxy, surrounded by automated defense systems that destroyed anything that came within 3 light years of their territory. 17 expeditions had been sent to make contact with them over the millennia. None had returned. What little was known about them came from ancient records. They were beings of living crystal, grown rather than born. They communicated through vibrations that traveled through solid matter, and they considered all organic life to be a contamination of the universe. "They will kill you," High Arbiter Zexthal said flatly. "This is not a matter of cultural misunderstanding. The crystalline empire views organic beings as disease. They have stated this clearly in every recorded communication." Ambassador Chen stood before the council once again. It had been 1 year since the revelation about human bonding abilities. In that time, humans had formed friendships with 37 species that had previously been considered impossible to communicate with. "We would like permission to attempt contact," he said. The Morgoth representative laughed, his stone body rumbling. "You humans are entertaining, foolish but entertaining." "We are serious," Ambassador Chen said. "Dr. Martinez has volunteered to lead the mission." The chamber erupted in noise. Even the usually calm Navashi scientists were agitated, their forms flickering between dimensions. "This is suicide," someone called out. "You are asking us to sanction the murder of your own people." "We are asking for permission to try," Ambassador Chen corrected. "That is all we have ever asked, the right to try." 3 months later, a small human ship approached the boundary of crystalline space. Its crew consisted of 12 volunteers, led by Dr. Sarah Martinez. The Vrixkal warrior Vrakthos had insisted on coming, despite knowing that the crystalline empire hated organic life. "You are my hunt sister," he had said when Sarah tried to convince him to stay. "Where you go, I follow." The defense systems detected them immediately. Sarah watched on the screen as 17 automated weapons platforms armed themselves and took aim at their ship. "Dr. Martinez," her pilot said nervously, "they are charging weapons." "I know, cut the engines." "What?" "Cut the engines, all of them. Life support too, everything except the communication array." The crew looked at her as if she had gone insane, but they had all volunteered for this mission. They knew what kind of person Sarah Martinez was. The engines went silent, the lights went dark, the ship drifted powerless toward the weapons platforms. And Sarah began to broadcast. Not words. The crystalline empire did not use words. They communicated through vibrations, through patterns of sound that traveled through solid matter. Sarah had spent months learning to create those patterns. She had worked with every scientist who had ever studied crystalline communications. She had practiced until her equipment could produce vibrations that matched their language. The message she sent was simple. It was a pattern that ancient records showed the crystalline empire used only once, 4,000 years ago, before they sealed themselves away from the rest of the galaxy. It meant, "I am here, I am listening." For 3 hours nothing happened. The weapons platform stayed armed. The ship drifted. The crew waited in darkness, using only the small emergency air supply to breathe. And then a response came. It was a vibration that shook the entire ship. Sarah felt it in her bones, in her teeth, in the core of her being. Her equipment translated it slowly. "You are organic," the message said. "Organic life is corruption. Why do you approach?" Sarah sent her reply. "Because we want to understand you, because you are alone, because no one should be alone for 4,000 years." Another long silence. Then, "You cannot understand us. Your kind sees the universe as resources to consume. We are matter that thinks. You would break us apart to fuel your expansion." "Some of us might," Sarah admitted. "Humans have done terrible things. We have made many mistakes, But we have also learned, we have grown, and we have learned that the greatest mistake is to stop trying to understand others. Why should we believe you? Sarah looked at Vrakthos, who sat beside her in the darkness. The Vrixkal warrior met her gaze with his 6 eyes. Because 1 year ago, she sent, the being next to me tried to kill me. Now he is my brother. I do not know how to explain humans to you, but I can tell you this, we do not give up on people, even when they try to kill us, even when everyone says it is impossible. The vibration that came back was different. It was softer, more complex. The translator struggled with it for a long moment before producing words. 4,000 years ago, organic beings came to us. They said they wanted peace. They said they wanted to trade, and then they began to harvest our children. Sarah felt cold. What? Our young grow slowly. They are beautiful. Organic species found them valuable as decorations, as power sources, as materials. They took them. Hundreds of thousands of our children broken apart and sold. I am so sorry, Sarah said. The words felt inadequate. I did not know. No one knows. We erased that history when we sealed our borders. The pain was too great to share. Sarah sat in the darkness, thinking about Rakval, the Vrixkal mother who had lost her child. She thought about her own son, Michael, who had died of a fever before the colony ship ever launched. She thought about 4,000 years of isolation, born from grief. I cannot change what was done to you, she sent finally. I cannot give back what was taken, but I can listen. And I can promise you this, if you let us, we will spend the rest of our existence making sure no one ever hurts your children again. The silence stretched longer this time. Minutes became an hour. The crew was running out of emergency air. And then slowly, the weapons platforms began to power down. Come, the Crystalline Empire said, tell us about this human concept of brother. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Within 5 years of Sarah Martinez's mission, the Crystalline Empire ended their 4,000-year isolation. They opened their borders not to everyone, but to humans. They said that humans were the first organic species they had ever trusted. This caused concern among other species. Some worried that humans were building an alliance, gathering powerful friends to eventually dominate the galaxy. They watched as humans befriended species after species, each one previously thought impossible to reach. The Hive Collective of Sector 7 had been at war with every neighbor they had ever encountered. They were a species of linked minds, millions of individuals sharing a single consciousness. They viewed separate minds as incomplete, broken, lonely. For centuries, they had tried to absorb other species into their collective by force. Humans established a research station at the edge of their territory. Within 3 years, Hive members were volunteering to visit human cities, experiencing individual existence for the first time. They did not leave the collective, but they learned that different forms of consciousness were not enemies. The Void Singers were beings of pure energy who lived in the space between stars. They had no physical form, no language that any species had ever decoded. They simply sang in frequencies that drove most organic beings insane. A human musician named James Cooper spent 12 years developing instruments that could respond to their frequencies. He learned to sing back to them. The first conversation between humans and Void Singers lasted 17 hours. By the end, the Void Singers had named James their first Echo friend. Even the Morgoth, who had laughed at humans in the council chamber, found themselves drawn into human friendships. A human geologist named Dr. Aisha Patel spent 4 years living among them, learning their stone language of vibrations and pressures. She attended the grinding ceremony when their elders passed on, an event no outsider had ever witnessed. You are strange creatures, the Morgoth elder told her afterward. You live such short lives. You are fragile as chalk, and yet you care about us as if we were your own children. Everyone deserves to be cared about, Aisha said simply. But not everyone was happy with these developments. In the Galactic Council, a faction began to form. They called themselves the Preservers, and they believed that humans were dangerous. "Look at what they are doing," said Representative Vexnal of the Kethrani. "They are changing species that have existed unchanged for millennia. The Vrixkal no longer kill as they once did. The Crystalline Empire has opened their borders. The Hive Collective questions their own unity." "Is change not good?" asked another representative. "Change that is forced is not good," Vexnal replied. "And the humans force change simply by existing. Their compassion is a weapon. Their friendship is a tool of conquest." The debate raged for months. Some species began to restrict human access to their territories. Others demanded that humans be forced to limit their contact with vulnerable species. Ambassador Chen addressed the council once again. He looked tired. The past 5 years had been filled with wonder, but also with constant suspicion and accusation. "You accuse us of using friendship as a weapon," he said. "But what is the alternative? Should we be like you were before, isolated, afraid, fighting wars that no one remembers the reason for?" "You do not understand," Vexnal said. "Some species need to remain as they are. The galaxy has balance. You are disrupting that balance." "The galaxy was not balanced," Ambassador Chen replied. "The galaxy was broken. Species that had existed for millions of years were alone, isolated in pain. We did not create that pain. We simply saw it, and we tried to help." The debate might have continued for years, but then something happened that changed everything. The Deep Ones awoke. No one knew exactly what the Deep Ones were. They existed in a layer of space that normal matter could not reach. They had been dormant for so long that they had become myth, stories that elder species told to frighten their young. But they were real, and they were hungry. The first attack destroyed an entire star system. 3 billion beings died in an instant as something reached up from beneath reality and pulled their sun into darkness. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. For the first time in its history, every species was present, even the ones who hated each other, even the ones who had not spoken in millennia. "We have analyzed the attack pattern," Senior Observer Quilks reported. "The Deep Ones are moving toward the galactic core. They appear to feed on conscious energy. The more minds in an area, the more attractive it is to them." "How do we fight them?" someone demanded. "We do not know. They exist outside normal space. Our weapons cannot reach them." "Then what do we do?" The chamber fell silent. For the first time in 12,000 years, the great powers of the galaxy had no answer. And then Sarah Martinez stood up. She was old now, her hair gray, her face lined with years. But her eyes still held the same fire that had made her walk unarmed toward Vrixkal warriors 5 years ago. "I have an idea," she said. The council turned to look at her, some with hope, some with skepticism, some with the same suspicion they had always had toward humans. "The Deep Ones feed on conscious energy," she continued. "Individual minds, isolated and alone, are easy prey. But what if we gave them something different? What if we showed them a galaxy that was not isolated, not alone, not afraid?" "What are you suggesting?" High Arbiter Zexthal asked. Sarah looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species, so different from each other, so long divided by fear and misunderstanding. "I am suggesting that we do what humans do best," she said. "I am suggesting that we make friends." The plan was insane. Everyone said so. Even the humans who had followed Sarah Martinez through impossible situations admitted that this was beyond anything they had attempted before. The idea was simple in concept but staggering in scope. The Deep Ones fed on isolated consciousness, on minds that were alone and afraid. Sarah proposed creating a network of connection that would span the entire galaxy. Not a hive mind, not a collective, but something new. a web of friendship and understanding that would link every sentient species together. If they feed on loneliness, she explained to the council, then we give them the opposite. We show them a galaxy where no one is alone, where every mind is connected to every other mind through bonds of care and compassion. This is impossible, Representative Vexnell said. You cannot make species that have hated each other for millennia suddenly become friends. I did not say it would be easy, Sarah replied. I said it was our only chance. The project began with the species that humans had already befriended. The Vrixkal sent warriors to protect worlds they had once hunted. The Crystalline Empire shared technology that could detect Deep One movements. The Hive Collective linked their minds to early warning systems across 3 sectors. But that was not enough. The galaxy contained thousands of species, most of whom had never spoken to each other. Ancient hatreds divided them. Old wars had left wounds that had never healed. Sarah organized teams, human diplomats, trained in the art of connection that came so naturally to their species, spread across the galaxy. They went to species that had been at war for centuries. They went to civilizations that had isolated themselves out of fear. They went to beings so strange that no one had ever thought communication was possible. On the planet Kethra, a human named Maria Santos sat between 2 species that had been fighting for 9,000 years. The conflict had started so long ago that no one remembered the original cause. Generation after generation had been taught only that the other side was the enemy. Maria did not try to negotiate peace. She did not talk about treaties or borders or reparations. Instead, she asked them about their children. Both species had the same answer. They wanted their children to be safe. They wanted their children to grow up without fear. They wanted their children to have a better future. Then let us start there, Maria said. Not as enemies, not as allies, just as parents who love their children. It took months. There were setbacks, moments when violence seemed inevitable. But slowly, carefully, the 2 species began to see each other not as monsters but as people. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Humans found common ground where none seemed to exist. They listened to species that had never been heard. They showed compassion to beings that had forgotten what kindness felt like. The Deep Ones continued their advance. 2 more star systems fell into darkness. The deadline was approaching, and the network was not yet complete. We need more time, Ambassador Chen reported to the Council. The connections are forming, but they are fragile. If we activate the network now, it might not hold. We do not have more time, High Arbiter Zexthal said. The Deep Ones will reach the core systems within 30 days. We must act now or not at all. Sarah Martinez, now confined to a medical bed due to her age, made the final decision. Activate the network, she said. Trust the bonds we have built. Trust the people we have become. The network activated. It was not technology, not in the traditional sense. It was something simpler and far more powerful. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings opened their minds to each other. Not to share thoughts or memories, but to share something more fundamental. They shared connection. A Vrixkal hunter felt the joy of a Kethrani child seeing her first sunrise. A Morgoth elder experienced the wonder of a Nevashi scientist discovering a new equation. A Void singer heard the laughter of human friends gathering for a meal. The bonds that humans had built over the past years became channels for something that had never existed before. Not unity, for each species remained distinct. Not sameness, for every being kept their own identity. But connection. A galaxy of individuals who knew, truly knew, that they were not alone. The Deep Ones felt it. They had awakened expecting to find what they always found. Isolated minds, easy prey, consciousness fragmented by fear and loneliness. Instead, they encountered something that made them pause for the first time in their ancient existence. They encountered a galaxy that cared about itself. The attack stopped. For 3 days, the Deep Ones simply watched, their vast, incomprehensible minds trying to understand what they were seeing. And then something unexpected happened. One of the Deep Ones reached out, not to feed, not to destroy, but to communicate. The message took years to translate. The Deep Ones did not think in words or concepts that any species could easily understand. But eventually, the meaning became clear. We have been alone for so long that we forgot what connection felt like. We fed on consciousness because we were hungry for something we could not name. We see now what we were missing. We see now what you have built. Sarah Martinez died 3 days after the message was translated. She was 107 years old, surrounded by friends from 40 different species. The Vrixkal warrior Vrakthos held her hand at the end, his massive claws gentle around her fragile fingers. "Thank you," he said, speaking the human words he had learned over decades of friendship. "Thank you for seeing me." Sarah smiled. "That is all any of us ever wanted," she whispered, "to be seen, to be known, to not be alone." She passed peacefully, and the galaxy mourned. But her legacy lived on. The network she had helped create continued to grow. The Deep Ones, no longer hungry, became strange but peaceful neighbors. They learned to communicate slowly with the beings of normal space. They shared knowledge from dimensions that no one had ever explored. And the Galactic Council, which had once debated whether humans were a threat, unanimously passed a resolution that would be remembered for millions of years. Humans, the resolution read, possess an ability unique in all known space. They can form bonds of genuine friendship with any sentient species. This ability is not a weapon or a tool of conquest. It is a gift. It is the most precious gift the galaxy has ever received. The resolution continued. Let it be known that from this day forward, humans are recognized not as a young species to be watched with suspicion, but as the heart of our galactic community. They have shown us what we could be. They have shown us what it means to reach out across the void and find a friend. On Kepler 442b, where it all began, a statue was erected. It showed Sarah Martinez offering food to a Vrixkal warrior. At the base, an inscription in 1,000 languages read, "She saw a monster and chose to see a friend." She changed the galaxy by refusing to be afraid. Humanity taught us that the strongest force in the universe is not fear or power or technology. It is the simple, stubborn choice to care about each other. And across the galaxy, in millions of places where different species had learned to live together, beings looked up at the stars and felt something they had never felt before. They felt connected. They felt hope. They felt like they had finally found what they had always been looking for. They felt like they had found home,